Today, we shall discuss the important proposals which this strategy is putting forward in terms of connecting Malta as an EU country to Africa, a vibrant and growing continent with important factors such as innovation, prosperity, and sustainability driving its ambition and optimism. We shall explore how Malta's strategy for Africa seeks to deepen and strengthen Malta's political, economic, and cultural relationships with Africa, contributing to peace, prosperity, and sustainable development. Today is only a beginning. This is the start of a consultation process, and we invite you to submit any feedback, remarks to us via email on africaconsultation.mftp@gov.mt. I now invite you to follow this video about Africa and the outlines of the strategy.
Ethiopia is enjoying an economic revival at breakneck speed.
Rwanda has the highest representation of women in politics in the world.
We've got wind, we've got sun, we've got water. We've got all of the resources that are necessary to not just build for ourselves, but also to export to the world.
Let's start with an amazing fact. By the end of the 21st century, 40% of people in the world will be African.
In recent years, Europe has strengthened its relationship with Africa, not just development and financial aid, but also as a strategic trading partner. The European Union is discussing on investing €40 billion in Africa, while the African Union's commitment to an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa places efforts on improving the continent's infrastructure, education system, and governance. With its $4 trillion and growing yearly trade, Africa is considered by many as the economy of the future and the continent of opportunities, with an economy that is developing at a rate of between 8 and 10% every year. Such economic growth means that in 2018, the African middle class was estimated at around 330 million people and increasing rapidly. To put things into perspective, Africa's middle class alone is almost as large as the entire population of the United States. Despite its size, Malta can play an important role in this unfolding scenario. Due to its geographical location and ability to innovate and adapt swiftly to changing circumstances, Malta serves as a perfect link between the two continents. The smallest EU country has proven itself worthy in this aspect in November 2015, when it successfully hosted the Valletta Summit on Migration, which brought together leaders from both continents. Furthermore, Malta's trade with Africa already reaches up to €770 million per year, leaving Malta with a trade surplus of €170 million. Malta's strategy for Africa thus seeks to deepen and strengthen Malta's political, economic, and cultural relationships with Africa, while supporting a more ambitious EU approach to our southern neighbors. This would aspire towards a win-win situation, a partnership where benefits can be reaped from both ends. A relationship that would allow businesses in Malta to continue thriving and expanding their horizons and businesses in African countries to expand, grow their skill sets and employment opportunities, ensuring further development and wealth. That will continue making Africa a safer place for growth. Malta and Africa, a strategy for partnership 2020 to 2025, a new narrative and a connected world.
It is a pleasure to invite Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade Promotion, Carmelo Abela, to deliver his opening address.
Thanks, Elaine. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, good morning to all of you, and thanks for being here. It is my great pleasure to present the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade Promotion's first consultation document leading to a consolidated strategy for Africa. A strategy which will clarify our national priorities and sharpen our focus in our relations with the continent of Africa over the coming years. Malta has engaged with the Mediterranean bordering countries of North Africa since time immemorial. We are physically close to our neighboring countries in the Maghreb. sharing many commonalities and a history shaped by the Mediterranean Sea. Perhaps less well recognized beyond the Maghreb, Malta has also enjoyed strong links with the rest of the African continent, initially through the work of missionaries and aid workers, but also through Malta's political engagement with the newly independent countries of Africa. We have continued to consolidate our links in recent times through membership of the Commonwealth and within the European Union. The Valletta Summit of 2015, which was hosted by Malta, sent an important message, namely that migration cannot be addressed as a singular issue. Malta has consistently taken a proactive role in seeking international solutions to the challenges of our times. The launch of our national strategy comes at the opportune time. Africa is very much on the agenda at the EU, and a strong signal lies in the fact that on the very first day of the new European Commission, President Ursula von der Leyen visited Addis Ababa for bilateral meetings with the Ethiopian government and also with the African Union. In these changing times, this Africa strategy provides us with a pathway to the future, which recognizes Africa's diversity as a continent of more than 50 countries. It also challenges us to update our appreciation of this continent, our analysis of trends and developments across Africa, and the way in which Africa relates to the wider world. This strategy also acknowledges the significant progress in terms of economic and social development, which is taking place throughout the continent. Changes which Malta applauds and which need to be recognized more widely. Africa is an emerging economic force. Malta's national strategy serves as a guide for the development of our relations with the continent of Africa in the period ahead, ensuring that we are not simply passive players in a changing world, but active contributors to solutions and worthy creators of mutually beneficial opportunities for Malta and for Africa. This strategy responds to the demands of a changing Africa and charts how we can deepen relations through the values of trust and the dialogue of partnership. The proposals to build on our strong existing relationships include a greater role for Maltese businesses, a role that will help create new investment and trade, which will be mutually beneficial to Malta and Africa. There is a clear message emerging, which we must heed. Africa does not simply want aid. It wants to develop and it wants to grow. In the words of Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo, a future beyond aid. Through more private sector investment, more trade, more joint ventures, and more business-to-business contact overall. I assure you today that Malta hears this message loudly and clearly. Malta-based enterprises are well placed to play a greater role in Africa, and we commit ourselves in this strategy to helping with the research, the networking, and the groundwork that can identify and facilitate two-way trade and investment. The strategy also highlights the importance of development and the sharing of good practice to empower a rising Africa by unleashing the potential of every person, irrespective of gender, creed, or orientation. In this regard, I wish to highlight the good work being done by Maltese civil society through the Malta government's Overseas Aid Programme, which proudly flies our flag and shares our values of solidarity and goodwill. Through this strategy, Malta will advocate for growth, for dignity, and for empowerment. We will seek to be true partners through our positions and policies within the European Union, within the United Nations, and elsewhere. Our size has never impeded us from engaging with vision and verve. This strategy opens the door to new opportunities, to innovation, and to a new way of working. It is an exciting prospect that demands of us that we learn to move and move on from the monochrome interpretation of Africa to embrace the opportunities of a continent of growth. Doing this requires a bold commitment to change and a frame of mind to be part of the solution rather than passive onlookers. To make this a success, we need to be part of the narrative of growth and opportunity in Africa. Finally, this document provides structure to our engagement and reassurance that our commitment is clear and unwavering. I have had the privilege of visiting a number of African countries in my capacity as Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade Promotion. I am excited by this strategy and I look forward to taking it forward through official visits and trade missions to Ghana, to Ivory Coast, and Ethiopia, which are planned for this year. This strategy is now open to the public for consultation, with my ministry's firm commitment that it will be implemented with determination to create wealth and opportunity in changing times. As an African proverb goes, tomorrow belongs to the people who prepare for it today. And that's why we are here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I now invite you to follow this message by the President for the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
A new decade has just started. There's one great question for us Europeans. Will Europe be able to shape the decade ahead of us? Can we change the world we live in and make it better? I believe we can, if we work together and together with others. I also believe that our continent's success is linked to that of another continent, a young, dynamic, and fast-developing continent, the great continent of Africa. It's a continent with immense aspirations and potential, a continent that is now setting up a pan-African free trade zone, a continent that understands climate change far better than anyone else. Africans share many of our aspirations. They also want to slow down global warming. They want to build a more peaceful world order and to create good jobs for young Africans inside their continent. All these goals are within our reach if Europe and Africa work together hand in hand. Malta could be Europe's bridge towards Africa. So I'm particularly glad that Malta is presenting a strategy for partnership with Africa. There could be no better way to open this new year and decade. Soon I will present Europe's strategy with Africa, And by the end of the year, the leaders of our two continents will meet to discuss the way forward. The 2020s can and will be different from the past. A better decade for Africa and for Europe alike, as our two continents work together side by side.
I now invite His Excellency Ronald Mikallef, Ambassador of Malta for Ethiopia and Malta's representative to the African Union, to deliver his address.
Thank you very much. Honourable Minister, distinguished guests, Excellencies, all protocol observed. It's a deep honour for me to look at the logo over there and to see Malta connected to Africa, connected proudly, connected not as a small island, but actually connected with a big idea. I believe that the logo says a lot about the spirit of this strategy, and my role today is to take us on the journey, explaining where we've come from and where we intend to go. So I'm not going to be technical. I'm not going to go into the detail of the strategy because, of course, you all have the document and you can read it in your free time. So please allow me the time to pursue some general thoughts and to share my gratitude, I think, for this point of arrival where we are today. It's a point of arrival that started for me back in 1984, and I hate saying this because I realize I'm not 32 years old anymore, with Band-Aid concerts. Bob Geldof, do they realize, will there be snow in Africa? Does it ever rain in Africa? It's the most idiotic thing that one could ever say, because of, yes, it does snow in Africa. And of course, Africa is not simply a place where there is poverty, but there is also people and opportunity. And for a long time, I think that perhaps we've been swayed by these negative images. Negative images which are very pervasive as well, because in 1989, I was contemplating life on the shores of a lake in Mozambique, reading Heart of Darkness. And the Heart of Darkness talks about Africa and compares it to London and gives us all these tedious comparisons which really influence our approach to trade, development, and diplomacy, which is what this presentation is about. Africa needs a new narrative, and that's why I beg you to indulge me with my long introduction. But the old narratives don't work anymore. And Malta needs to find its place in that narrative, recognizing that we are on Africa's border. Malta is the African Union's border state. I think some background. Our engagement with Africa historically is long, in fact. And I was sharing some interesting anecdotes. Many people don't realize that it was a Maltese explorer who discovered the source of the Blue Nile in the late 19th century. There's a reference to this in the strategy. For those people who are from the three cities, Andrea De Bono was from Senglia, so I'm a very proud exponent of Maltese traveling in Africa over a long time. And I won't go into the depths of history because in the 1980s, Malta was at the forefront in the anti-apartheid liberation struggle in Southern Africa, with Malta offering hundreds of scholarships to Namibian students at the time. Scholarships for nurses, scholarships for mechanics, scholarships in the trade. We're looking at about 450 scholarships per year, which contributed to the birth of Namibia. And going forward, in the 1990s, Malta has played a very important role on Africa within the European Union and within the Commonwealth. In the 2000s, we continued to pursue this role. The Valletta Summit is a critical meeting that for the first time dispatched the idea of migration as a singular issue and placed it within trade, development, and diplomacy. Malta set history on that occasion, and I hope that we will be setting history in the future. In 2015, Trade Malta led the initiative leading us to where we are today. Important market research was commissioned by Trade Malta, which asked businessmen, where are your plans? Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? And Africa came forward as a priority. 5 years later, a lot has happened. Trade missions to Algeria, state visits to Ghana, a Ghanaian state visit to Malta, the commencement of a High Commission in Ghana is a very proud moment, and we're looking at the official opening happening in a few weeks' time. The first Maltese embassy in sub-Saharan Africa. In Ethiopia, we have a non-resident, and I'm also non-permanent, so that is something to reassure you about. But non-resident ambassadors in Ethiopia and South Africa. We also have a non-resident ambassador to the African Union. These are small but important steps leading towards a network of presence in sub-Saharan Africa. A network of presence that will facilitate trade, that will facilitate development, that will facilitate diplomacy. The die has been cast. We are establishing presence. A successful Africa is very much in Malta's and Europe's interest. Despite the fact that I have many presentations here, I would be more than happy if I simply focused on this presentation for today, because this presentation, colorful as it is, represents what this strategy is about. Firstly, the strategy is timely. The first recent strategy by a European state for Africa was launched on the 19th of December in the Republic of Ireland. Here we are on the 8th of January with the second national strategy on Africa in Valletta, followed soon by Finland that has announced that it is launching its national strategy. As we see, the European Union is engaging with Africa in a completely different manner, departing from the idea of Africa as 55 unique countries and recognizing the vital importance of the African Union as an interlocutor to the European Union. Malta must find its voice in this discussion. And the strategy proposes that the voice should focus on 3 pillars. Separate, but referential to each other. Trade on the left, yes, of course, trade is vital. But the idea of trade is not that we simply unleash our warehouses and sell products to Africa, but engaging in new technologies, creating new spaces, getting the vibrancy of youth to create digital content, recognizing as well that Africa is now in the space technology sphere and that we too need to not only share but learn from the opportunities that Africa is creating today. There's much to say about trade, and I don't wish to be idealistic. Yes, of course, there are challenges. Letters of credit, Malta's brand in general. Who are we? How do we communicate? What are we there for? All of these issues are articulated in the strategy. But I'm a firm believer that we have a great opportunity to reorientate ourselves, to look deep within ourselves as a nation and to think, who are we? Where do we come from? Where do we want to go? How can we create new products? How can we create new value? And by the same token, I think we need to look at development and walk away from the idea that a small nation state is going to create a solution for poverty, for migration. We can support capacity building, however. We can share our knowledge. We need to take a different view and engage. This is what the Ministry is doing through its partnership with civil society. Diplomacy is at a very exciting time as well. As the European Union embarks on a new dialogue with Africa, Malta should be there, changing the way the European Union talks to Africa, referring to the importance of SMEs. SMEs for Europe, SMEs for Africa. This is a voice that is vital in Europe, and it's a voice that we understand very well. We are a nation that has developed, that has learned, that has made mistakes, and that looks forward. And I believe that all of these attributes make us a very important bridge between Africa and the European Union. At this point, much to my disappointment, because I had another 25 PowerPoint sheets over here, but I shall stop there, and safe in the knowledge that you have the full presentation, and that the rest of the presentation takes us from a vision to actually the implementation, where I'd just like to make one final point to conclude, that we need to be aware that results count. Results in terms of clear business objectives, results in clear focus, results in terms of working with countries that we can really work with. Let us change the way we've done this, and let us really move into a closeness between Africa and Malta and the EU. Thank you very much.